Welcome to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. Today, we are recording on February 21st. We have Colin back in the studio, and we're here to really talk about book release day, which is February 24th and the day that the episode comes out.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this day for a long time, so exciting to finally have it be here and get to talk about it. How do you feel?
It is very surreal. I think that a week ago, I was still just kind of in denial, and I was like, nothing big is about to happen. And now I'm really excited and nervous. Um, I pretty much don't have any frame of reference. Like, I have nothing to compare to, and I don't know what the next week and the next month are going to look like at all.
I feel like we've put out so much content, like you've put out so much over the last 3 years. Each one of those, maybe there's a little bit of nerves going out before each one, but this is, I feel like it is obviously different when you're putting out something that is like not editable anymore. It's just out there. All this other stuff, you can always go back. You can delete it, change it, update it, whatever you want. But the book is obviously, more of a moment in time. And it's something that, you've been writing over the last several years. So if anything, it's a little bit behind you. How do you feel about sort of giving that out to the world and just, not being able to control how people accept it?
I do think that I have totally given up the idea that I could control in any way, like how people are going to receive my art. And I feel okay about that. That's not why I create art. That's not why anyone creates art, I think. Or if you are doing it with the intention of kind of like controlling perception, I guess I don't find that people have a lot of success with that. So I'm not as worried about that portion, but I do think that you bring up a great point, which I was reading The Creative Act recently, and they just talk about how anytime an artist does put their work out into the world, it is a reflection of them. It does kind of capture them and their essence in that cross section in time when they created it. Like you said, this was, you know, in its final form turned in, 6 months ago now? So maybe a little bit less, but absolutely. We started a very long time ago. It was a 3-year-old journey. And it's interesting because the Creative Act uses this language of basically you put the art out and you continue moving on with your life. You create the next thing, you keep moving. And at a certain point, the work is no longer a mirror reflection of you. It feels more like an old photograph. And I do think that this is interesting. I see it happening already. Like, it is feeling more like an old photograph than a mirror.
Yeah, for sure. You said it's supposed to be sort of the essence of you. What essence do you want people to get from it? What essence are you trying to give off?
It is really fundamentally, I think, a story about a person who had very little self-knowledge, self-actualization, who goes on a journey and, fairly painstakingly develops that. And so at the end, this book almost ends with essentially now a person who, now they have some self-knowledge. Now they really have a shot at being effective and have a shot at being happy, all these things. And of course, that's kind of where the book ends. Like, I know some of the early readers really gave the feedback of like, I want the next book now. I'm very interested in what happens next. Like, they kind of want what my life has actually been over the past year. That's a future book. I'm still living that right now. So it's kind of interesting.
I do think some of, the last year, that's been a bit more out in the open, so certainly there's more stories to tell about it, but I do think people are going to find the early life, the med school into residency, like all that stuff. It's like you've hinted at it. If people have been following you or heard your stories, they certainly might recognize even some of them, but all together, I think it just tells like a very different story. So I do think people will find it very interesting, especially if you're already a fan of Frances Mei, but certainly if not, this very much is like maybe one of the more extreme, it's just an extreme version of like you at this crossroads in your life, looking back and maybe even reflecting and sort of giving forgiveness to the younger version of yourself. And basically the reader is able to see you sort of work through this in real time, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, that's really what we were ultimately shooting for. It was certainly like a long process to get there. What would you say your kind of biggest breakthrough in terms of, we put down the first version, it was kind of a series of stories. It was like you being pretty angry, wanting to get revenge, basically. And then now all of a sudden we have this finished version. Like, what was, or maybe one, two, or three different versions, but like, what was kind of the big thing that got you all the way to the finish line?
Yeah, well, I think like you tell me all the time because just so you guys know, I wake up Colin like most days. I'm just like hovering over him and I'm like, when do you think I'm gonna have a big break? And every day he says, there's probably not gonna be a big break. You know, it's a series of hundreds of little breaks and so I don't think that the book had like just one breakthrough per se as much as it had like 100 iterative drafts. I do think that the biggest breakthrough, because I've talked about this before, but basically the first vomit draft version of my book, I worked really hard on it. I brought it to you, and it was my life story as I understood it. And, you know, you read it and you just came back with the feedback that you said lovingly, which is most of this is not true. And I feel like that I really heard you when you said that, but I was also perplexed because, of course, again, I didn't know why or how or which parts were not true. Turns out most of it. And it really, especially for people in medicine, I think we do have to do so many mental gymnastics to just get through like the decade plus of training and things like that. So we tell ourselves all sorts of stories about ourselves that may not necessarily be true. Many people probably take them to the grave because they never more closely examine or test them. And I'm glad I did. I really like, even though it can be painstaking, and we talk about this in our physicians writers group all the time, like it is not always fun. There have definitely been feelings of discomfort that arise. But feeling like, oh, I live a life completely free of discomfort, I love all the stories I tell myself, I don't want to examine them. I think that quote unquote comfort is a little bit of an illusion. And so, like, having a real, genuine shot at peace is, I think, on the other side of examining those stories. But in terms of really, so a huge breakthrough was when I finally let go of trying to control the narrative, right? Or like control the perception of me. Like, oh, I want to look like a really smart, cool person. And I do think, right, so in order to make that happen from the actual story of my life, we were jumping through some hoops and mental gymnastics. And really, like, one of the things I'm most proud of about the book is that I'm truly putting it out there. This is not to change anybody's idea of me, perception of me. Uh, there's basically a quote that, like, the best art in history, it's created with complete freedom of self-expression, and it's received with complete freedom of interpretation. I feel really good about that. The other thing that you mentioned was how the first drafts were so angry. I agree, and I know that we heard that from multiple literary agents, you know, and bigger publishing houses. That's another thing I'm really proud of in the final product, just that I don't think the final product's very angry. Do you think that there's much anger in it?
Well, I don't think it had, like, what we had to do was strip out you, the author's like point of view, like glaringly coming through, right? Because the character, I mean, you,
She's
Frances May,
angry.
you
Yeah.
were very angry for a lot of portion of this book. But frankly, it's not, I wouldn't say that's like the main thing that you're going to get from reading this, is that like, oh my God, this person's so angry. It's more like, I mean, confusion, exhaustion, like that leads to maybe more frustration, I guess, than anything. I mean, there's certainly like explosive bouts of anger. But
Yeah, just as like a poor coping mechanism.
yeah, right. Which I actually think is like more interesting because, like living through it, it manifested itself in anger a lot, right? You were literally angry, like quite frequently over that 5-year period, but it was never like you're just an angry person, right? And that's kind of what you had to figure out here was that you sort of told yourself, well, I guess I'm just an angry person, and that's what it is. But getting out of the hospital, getting out of this job, you're realizing, oh, that's not like your main emotion anymore. And so maybe it was just tied to something. So I do think it's more interesting to explore, well, what was driving that, as opposed to just like, here's an angry person who was just like living through a thing for 5 years. Um, so I think it came out better that we didn't focus specifically on the anger.
For sure. And like you said, the most important thing was that, like, because I was a new writer at the time, also had a lot of anger that I hadn't worked through. 3 years ago, in the manuscript, like, the narrator was angry. And so I really took to heart. I'm very aware now, like, you know, readers don't want to be told how to feel. Readers aren't idiots, right? Like, I love, I am proud of the reader can interpret these scenes from the book however they're going to interpret them. And it definitely won't necessarily always be the way that I personally interpret them, but that is not part of, the art that we're putting out into the world. Just my personal opinion about maybe some of what I loved or didn't love.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's say this book was never even really going to come out, or we just couldn't quite figure out a way to like get this out to the world. Would you still have gone through this process and wrote all of this? Because, you know, I think obviously you forcing yourself to sit down and write all of this, force yourself to grapple with a lot of these things in a way that you might not have if you weren't trying to create something from that. Like, do you think it was all worth it from that side, not even from the, hey, I ended up with like this awesome book?
Yes, I definitely think that. I do think it was important, though. I would never have sat down or examined myself in my life and done this work if I wasn't working towards something. But this is really how I learned a whole new meaning of, like, it's about the journey and not the end point. Because if you're saying in your question, what if we got to here and then the book didn't come out? This still was an incredibly worthwhile journey for me. The time, the money, the effort. And that's because I am like a completely different person on the far side of it in a way that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that. But you are certainly a very goal oriented person. So if I had told you this book's never going to come out, you probably just would never have done it. So,
For
um,
sure would not have done,
yeah,
yeah, I don't, and I do feel like I'm not great about, like, I don't really have a ton of hobbies. I don't do a ton of things that are just purely for fun. Although cozy gaming is probably like as close, but in the cozy game I
yeah,
am grinding.
I
But
know you're still trying to like maximize your like farm value for no reason, but
well, it's fun for me to maximize value. And so yeah, but like other than cozy gaming, I just, again, I don't discount this was like such a big undertaking. I also had to learn so many new things, like the writers group itself. Very expensive, a huge investment. I know that we were looking at MFA programs, but either way, I wouldn't change anything about how we got here. And yeah, I mean, I guess so. My questions for you would be, how different do you think I am now? And what's different?
compared to like 3 years ago, I mean, you're extremely different. 3 years ago, this is probably almost like exactly when we launched Rethinking Residency 3 years ago. I want to say it was like
Yeah.
middle of February.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So this was 3 years ago, pretty much to the day, was I would say about the first time that we started to like try and peel back the layers and figure out what was going on behind the scenes, how you could use it. Well, and when I say that, I mean, I think it was the first time that you were ready for it. Not that like we had just like never talked about you or tried to explore any of these things, but I just don't think you were ready to actually grapple with it. I think in this first iteration, right, when we did Rethinking Residency, that was basically a year. And like, yes, you were writing your book, but it was going kind of slowly. Like we were getting little essays here and there. But you were writing for Rethinking Residency in the form of, let me pass this knowledge on to other people. Let me see how I can take what happened to me, learn about it generally, and then try and repackage that. So like it was almost this roundabout way. You didn't have to like stare it right in the mouth and say, well, could I have done something differently? Or, how was my reaction to it? But you could be like, well, if there was another just random person who was going through the same thing, here's how they could have handled it. And I think decoupling that probably helped you to first sort of grapple with those things. So like that was like the first iteration. And then you really wrote those first versions very like it was just the story. There wasn't a ton of like you, the character in it. So like some of the original essays are pretty close to what ended up being in this book in terms of just like the sort of set piece, the action that happened, certainly the residency stuff. Because some of those are just, it's it's what happened, and you could already do that fairly well, which was just like keep the
Well, because
tension
that's
going
like
and
clinical writing too, though. No,
yeah,
I can definitely just like say clearly something that happened. I feel like
right.
I've always had that skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I think starting the writers group was tough for you because um you had never really shared your work with other people. And I think you really did not want to get feedback, and you did not want to hear other people getting praise when you weren't getting the praise. And it was like, I think it was tough for you to just accept that like, hey, maybe I'm not that good a writer right now, and I actually need to work at this in a way that you really maybe haven't had to do in a lot of other things in your life because they kind of came naturally.
I feel like I tried to quit
You try
every
to quit a
week,
lot. Yeah,
just every week,
I know.
and you wouldn't let me quit, which I appreciate now, but was
Yeah.
annoying at the time.
Well, and there was a lot of resistance to writing. Like you would just be like, well, I'm just gonna I have this one essay that I like, and I'll just have them, edit that to death. And it's like, okay, well, we're not really moving forward. They couldn't help you in the writers group talk broadly about the story because you weren't giving them the whole picture. It was just like, I've got these two things, and I know this story is good, so I'll stick with this because then I'll get a little bit of praise for that. But once you kind of opened up and gave, and some of that I think was just getting more comfortable with these new people and the instructors and everything. But I mean, it's probably like a year and a half ago that was sort of the breakthrough. I mean, it was really also when you kind of officially said, hey, I don't want to renew this contract. I'm leaving the hospital. And I think that was
For
the
sure,
turning point of
because
like, I need to figure stuff out.
yeah, not only I need to figure it out and like it's life and death if I figure out a new career or not, but also just knowing that trajectory. Like I do think that a doctor who is going to be renewing a contract and practicing, clinically for a decade here, that's very different. The book would be different compared to, oh, okay, perfect. I have an end date. I know I'm out. I know that the book will come out after I'm done at the hospital.
Right. That did for sure. Cause I think that was some of it, even like early pieces that we were putting out for RR or things on social media, you were very hesitant to share any personal stuff. It was like, well, patients are going to see this, and I don't, and that's
Yeah.
pretty valid.
Especially in a small town. Yeah, it
Right.
just like I am glad I stayed off of social media essentially
Yeah.
during the practice.
Yeah. But I think, when you really threw yourself into it, it forced you to examine yourself as an individual. You're obviously very good at, and this is what makes doctors good at things. Like there's probably something to this, right? Like doctors do not often examine themselves, maybe a lot of, sort of stunting going on there. They're also like basically experts at just sort of following algorithms and figuring out what's the most likely solution. So for you, it was like, well, I'm just an angry person, that is what it is. Like if an angry person presented, you're not going to dig into their past and all these different relationships and try and figure out like what specifically made that person angry. But you are good at just saying, okay, well, this is what it is. How do we treat the anger? Right. But this process made you actually go through, and as you're writing a specific story, we would read it back and we're kind of like, well, this doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Like I'm as a third party reading this and I don't really understand why this reaction would happen, right? It doesn't, like, who is this person? And there was no way to get to that without you sort of first examining yourself and trying to think back, and also just look at yourself now and say, well, why am I like that? Why did things happen this way? And um why would that person maybe have responded to me in a certain way, right? Because at the time you were like, that person's a jerk. But you sort of having to replay these things made you realize, okay, well, maybe there's some broader things at play about myself that I just like haven't looked at. Um, and so anyway, long answer, but certainly you are like very, very different from 3 years ago. I think you are just much more open to yourself. You're much more, which, consequently makes you much more open to the world, right? Because you're not keeping things away that might threaten your own sense of self or whatever it is. So it lets you take a lot more chances. It lets you just try new things. And I would say that's pretty significantly changed how you go about your day.
I definitely agree with that. The paradox is just that, like, before, when I was over threshold all the time, I got really easily overwhelmed, like, if we went out or went to events and things like that, and I just like, now, I can go out way, way more because I'm not over threshold anymore. I think I'm just operating from a place where the world is, like, less scary to me. I definitely feel like I got to a place by the later residency years where, like, everything was really scary, to me, and that played out in every area of life. It's funny too, though, because I do feel like even though I didn't start the work of examining, like, why I am the way that I am and also who I am until these past few years, like, way later, obviously, I do think that it sounds like you were doing some of that thinking and work, the whole way along the ride. And it reminds me of this quote that I love, which is basically, we're all looking for someone who knows who we are and will break it to us gently.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. We just had to wait till you were um, able to accept it, I suppose.
Not even accept it, but, like, I guess if you would have brought it up sooner, I would have just been mad, able to even, like, be
Well,
in
you
a
have taken
place
it
to.
as like an accusation. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite parts of the book?
Well, I do. I mean, I really like the early parts of it. Um, for me, obviously, I was there during all this residency stuff, so I know these stories very well. I was involved in a lot of them. They're very good, and I'm sure the residency portion is going to be a lot of readers' favorite parts. But for me, I really like the early stuff because obviously, I was not there when you were growing up. I've heard all these stories, we've talked about them and everything, but just hearing them through your lens um, is very interesting to me. I like those parts a lot. Do you remember everything that's in the book? I mean, like you said, you kind of finished this 6 months ago, and a lot of this was maybe even originally written, a year or 2 years ago.
I mean, I have a pretty good memory, so I think I have a good sense, although what probably could trip me up too is almost like very, very late edits. Like if there was something removed at the 11th hour, I might actually still think it's in there or something like that. Definitely gotta reread it at some point. Um, but yeah, it is funny because like you said, we've been sharing maybe like snippets or alluding to different stories over the years. I am actually excited for, as of this week, everyone can see the whole story. Part of me is almost like, come on, you guys have the whole story. And it's like, we don't. I just put pen to paper a long time ago. And I'm glad that, like, now there won't, and I'm glad that now there won't be any of this, like, really? I could have sworn that I explained that.
It'll be interesting because certainly, the people that are going to pop off in your Instagram comments, they're not probably reading your whole book. So like, you'll have a more like informed base versus people who are like, you should have known what you were getting into. It's like, well, it's a lot more nuance than that, and there's a whole explanation for it, but might take a little bit of time to read. Although truly, for anyone who's listening and hasn't got it yet, it's like 270 pages, I think, but it like rips through. Like it's people, a lot of the advanced readers and stuff we went out, sent out, they were like, I finished it in one night. So it's
Yeah,
very,
it is like a one sitting
yeah,
readable thing.
yeah. What advice do you have for someone who wants to write a book, is writing a book, and just kind of like doesn't know what to do next or is just spinning their wheels?
Well, there's a million different ways to write a book. No wrong way, right? You can outline first, you cannot outline first, you can do all your chapter summaries, you could not. I was taught in the school of, and personally agree with, and I'm going to continue carrying forward, like, get the vomit draft out. Because basically, especially type A people or perfectionists, they can toil for 100 years and maybe at the end of it end up with like one really phenomenal book proposal or 1 to 5 really phenomenal chapters or essays or something like that. But you don't have a book. And so this thought that it's really important to finish a complete manuscript, get the first vomit draft of your book out, I do believe that that's important, even for me in the nonfiction world. Of course, in fiction, you get agent representation and also sell books based on complete manuscripts. Even though you don't on the nonfiction side, you just need like spec chapters. Um, I love and believe in the quote, which is like, sometimes it isn't until the end of your vomit draft that you know what the book is really about, or start to have an inkling about what the book is really about. So in that vein, really important to do that. Not only that, but the other thing I'll say to try to convince you is that it can be harmful to the artist's process going the other way, which is that Colin talked about writers group, and I would say a huge breakthrough for me in writers group was just not being so precious about my writing, because I came to that group with like a half dozen essays that I had been sitting on and toiling with for like going on a year. That is not that's not best practices. I'm not going to do that again. I'm not falling for that one again, because what effect that had is that I was so attached to those essays. I had put tons of work and tons of like drafting. My girlfriends, all the girls I shout out in my book, shout out to Jill and Becky, like just core early readership who looked at those early chapters. Those, it's much better and cleaner. I would recommend get your full vomit draft out. Then you're going to have an inkling about what the book's about. Redraft, iterate on that. I wouldn't put your girlfriends through, what I put my girlfriends through, of just reading like those early essays over and over and over again, because those ultimately like transformed a lot before they ever slotted into the final product. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that's helpful to people. I think that if you toil for way too long on these little pieces, then essentially when people are trying to help you make them better, you're just going to be married to them. It'll feel really bad. Whereas now I don't get too attached to any of my writing, and I'm also not going to spend like a few months on one piece.
Yeah, and just to define, I mean, I know you've said the term vomit draft on like different shows and stuff before, but that's just full first draft from beginning to end. Don't care about any, I mean, even tenses we're not worried about. We're not worried about, grammatical errors. And the big thing is that just don't have anyone else read it. It's like just for you to just get the story out. Maybe you can have someone read sort of your full draft at the end, but yeah, to your point, it's not, oh, let me do 3 chapters, get some feedback, let me keep going. It's just like start to finish, get it out, and now we can start the process from there.
Yeah, like, and we were encouraged, don't change the names in your vomit draft. It's for your eyes only. It's fine. And because what a lot of writers do is that once they start, curbing the names, thinking about, well, I got to keep, how do I hater proof this? Hater proofing is the third and final draft, of the manuscript. So step 1, write the vomit draft, that complete tip to tail first go at it. Step 2 is basically redraft that 50 or 100 or 150 times. Like, just keep working with the clay until you have the product that you want. Step 3 is hater proofing the draft, which, yeah, involves changing names, having a media lawyer, all these things.
Okay. Well, so this comes out on release day. Very exciting day for you, for all of us. And then book tour starts. So you're on the road. I mean, mostly on the road for the next 2 months. We're starting in New York this upcoming weekend, Friday and Saturday. And then where else are you going?
Yep, I cannot wait. I'm sure I will be quite homesick by the end, but this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I'm excited. Like you said, I am heading out. I actually fly to New York City first thing Wednesday morning, the 25th. I'll be in New York for a week. Then I head out direct to San Francisco. I am giving some talks at UC Davis that I've been so excited about at a conference. And then from there, I'll be home for a few days before the Cleveland event. So there's the Cleveland stop of the book tour. I come back, do laundry, home for like 2 days, and then we go to Chicago, which I'm really excited because in Chicago, we are going to do a stop at my old high school, the Illinois Math and Science Academy. Very excited to bring you there. I know you have not been, and I've told you a lot about it. And then we're doing an event in Oak Park. All of these like book tour dates are posted online. And also, if you go to francesmei.com, like /surgeon on the edge with hyphens in there, or you just go to francesmei.com and look at the book tour, you can RSVP for any of these spots. After Chicago, our next stop on the book tour is Philadelphia, which is in early April. Very excited for that one, and that's done in partnership with Clove, our favorite shoe brand, both for healthcare workers, but also they're really like an incredibly beautiful lifestyle shoe. Like, I wear my Clove Super Boots most days, and I'm definitely taking them to New York because it's supposed to snow. And then a brand new update is that we are adding a stop at Cambridge later in April. I'm so excited to go out and connect with the students out there.
This is Cambridge University in England, not Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cambridge.
Yes, very exciting. Actually, I was going to ask you, do you have your calendar printed out in front of you? Like your
No,
color code
you
one?
do.
Oh, I have one up here because someone in the last show asked about your calendar, and we couldn't figure out a way to like put
Yeah,
a
to add it to
picture in the
YouTube.
comments. So I'm
Okay,
just gonna
yeah.
put it
So,
on here. All right, hold on a sec.
okay, but don't put it like too close because it does just have all of my like travel details and flight info on it.
Okay, we won't.
Yeah,
Okay, we
don't
won't
blow up
show
my
all.
spot.
Yeah, we won't
Like,
show all
dox
details
me.
here, but just to show the design of it. So basically, color coded. This is March.
Color coded by city.
Yeah. This is April. You can see it's like split by days and everything. And what? Or sorry, I guess this is February, March. This is an old one, but
Yeah, I have it updated.
yeah. But anyway, I feel like you had fun with that you made that in Canva, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I've definitely reached like the pinnacle of Canva. I'm trying to get some Illustrator skills.
Yeah. Up next. Okay. Well, congratulations. This is a long time coming. We're very proud of you. Any final surgeon on the edge words?
I really appreciate every single listener of the show, every person who supports the book. I really hope I get to meet some of you guys on tour. If not this time, then, future events or author experiences. Yeah, I think my final words would be the famous quote, "You get in life what you have the courage to ask for."
Very nice. Very apt. Okay. You want to take us out?
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a review. Check out all of our shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com.
And check out Surgeon on the Edge, out today, February 24th. Woo! Bye-bye.